Ooh, can everyone hear me? Everyone's good? Okay, awesome. So it's awesome to see all you guys here. For those who don't know me, my name is Michael Christie. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the Student Body Chief Diversity Officer. I'm part of the undergraduate student government, and I'm so excited to have all you guys here and all the panelists here today. We are going to start off this event with a land acknowledgement by Sammy Go. So Sammy, if you want to come up.
Tapku, good evening. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the territory of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Scottacoke, Golden Pocahontas, Nipmuc, and Lenape peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We thank them for their strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sammy. And before I introduce the event, I want to invite the president of the NAACP Uconn to come up to give a few words.
Thank you, and thank you all for a few moments of your time. I just wanted to take a moment to ask you all for your support for a local cause. As some of you may know, Hartford Healthcare Medical Group is shutting down the maternity ward at Wyndham Hospital, providing people who are giving birth with the options of being primarily helicoptered to Hartford Hospital. And you know, all the various stresses involved with that, the alternative being ambulance about 30 miles to the next closest place to give birth. There is an upcoming hearing about this tomorrow, and they are searching for testimonials and community engagement to convince the state to tell Hartford Healthcare to keep that maternity ward open. So if this is something you're interested in supporting, there is a petition you can sign. It is in our Instagram bio, Uconn and NAACP. You can also submit testimony directly, and you can feel free to DM us or reach out directly to me for more information on how to do that. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Michael Christie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Damani. So hello, everyone. Again, welcome to the Black Leadership Town Hall. As you can see, we have a number of wonderful panelists here today who've taken their Tuesday night to be here to answer some questions from our lovely moderator, Josie Hamilton, who's also the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager of the Undergraduate Student Government. Is also a part of the Black Student Association and works also in the African American Cultural Association. So a very involved individual when it comes to Black leadership at the University of Connecticut. Today is really just an opportunity for us to ask Black leaders at a predominantly white institution questions about what it means to lead, how they got to these positions, and how they kind of navigate through the world and the lens that they're living through today. With everything that's happened over the past couple of years, and really since the beginning of time, there's always been struggles that Black individuals have gone through. And it's so inspiring, so amazing to see that all these individuals came through some sort of struggle to get here today to be an example of what it means to be a Black leader in society today. So with that, without it taking any more time, because I want to get right to these panelists and their lovely words, I'm going to throw it over to Josie. So thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Josie, and I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager for Uconn Student Government. And I think we're just going to get right into introductions. So why don't we start with Dean Nelson? Do you want to just introduce yourself and say what you do?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Dean Ebony Nelson. I'm the Dean of the University of Connecticut School of Law in Hartford. It's great to be with you this evening. Thank you.
Dr. Price?
Hello, everyone. I'm Walina Price, Director of the African American Cultural Center and affiliate faculty. And I just want to begin by thanking Michael and Josie and Mason and who else, Bria, DeMonte, all of you extraordinary leaders for giving us this opportunity tonight. And of course, the distinguished panelists. Good to see all of you. Thank you for being here.
AVP Pro.
I'm Lakeisha Brown. Lakeisha Brown. I am Associate Vice President of Human Resources at Uconn Health.
Dr. Tuitt.
Good evening, everyone. Frank Tuitt, Vice President, Chief Diversity Officer, and Professor of Higher Education and STEAM.
Leticia Reed, Associate Vice President of Institutional Equity, Office of Institutional Equity. I also serve as the university's Title IX Coordinator, as well as ADA Coordinator.
Good evening. I'm Lloyd Blanchard. I'm the Interim Chief Financial Officer. I also serve on the faculty of the Department of Public Policy. It's good to be here. It's good to see you all here.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Andy Aguinobi, the interim president, and it's just awesome. I'm just looking forward to the discussion.
So the first question that we have here is actually for everybody on the panel. So we'll start with Dean Nelson and just make our way over here. So the first question is, how has it been leading a predominantly white space, and have you had any experience with pushback?
So again, I want to thank everyone for the invitation and for organizing this great event. How has it been leading a predominantly white space? Have I had experience with pushback? So I would like to say that I began my leadership roles at another institution, the University of South Carolina School of Law. So I was there for 13 years before moving here just about a year ago. And so in leading in those predominantly white spaces, it's been very, very rewarding. The main reason why probably all of us are in the roles that we're in is that we like to have impact and we want to be of service to help students in particular, for me, achieve their personal and professional goals. And as we do that work as Black leaders in predominantly white institutions, there are definitely challenges that come up. There have been times where I have applied for certain leadership roles and been denied those leadership roles, some of those roles having to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it felt not like just like a career pushback, but a personal pushback when there was not alignment with the institution and, the goals that I had for that position. And so, when you have those pushbacks, you just overcome those challenges and you realize that you're there for a higher purpose and that you have higher goals and that the impact that you want to have, at least for me, particularly in the lives of students, makes the challenges worth it. And so even when I've experienced those pushbacks, I haven't let them deter me from reaching my ultimate goal, which is really being impactful for students.
As someone who was brought up in the Deep South in Atlanta, Georgia, in practically totally Black everything, community experience, the school, the church, everything. And then to be in a situation in this predominantly white setting, I found it very, very, very interesting and quite interesting, enlightening in so many different ways. When I think about pushback in any setting, whatever it is, I don't receive it. I just don't. I mean, I see resistance in many cases, and I don't receive it as pushback because I think this resistance is just a part of life. There are going to be good days, there are going to be bad days, there are going to be challenging days, and all these other things are going to happen. And so you receive it and you keep going no matter what, with a lot of talking to ourselves about, no, this is not pushback, I will not receive that. But always, ultimately, I'm looking to learn from whatever is happening. So good, bad, or indifferent, something that's coming at me that I don't really like, I wish it were different. Again, I'm not, oh my gosh, there's pushback. No, I'm like, this is empowering, it's challenging, and I'm going to find a way, and sometimes it's hard, but I'm going to find a way to learn from it. That's my story.
So my experience in human resources puts me behind the scenes oftentimes to the mechanisms of how things work with the employer. And, in terms of leading in a predominantly white space, that is just all of my experience. So it doesn't really feel any different than what I experience every day. Pushback absolutely happens all the time. I put it down to a matter of job responsibility. I can go back to the beginning of my career and think about times when I didn't have the knowledge or maybe self-confidence to push back as hard as I should have. But that was part of the growing pains and the learning for me, to set myself up to be a leader that makes a difference. In terms of interviewing, recruiting, hiring, pay equity, all of those things that matter, disciplinary actions, I see all of the time how they play out with Black employees. I had an experience several years ago with an employer where a Black female had come into work intoxicated. And it was a very long story. I had to go down and see what was happening, get her off site. She ended up having a true mental breakdown and went into the hospital and was kept for 30 days. During the time she was out, I was directed to terminate her. And that was my moment of ultimate pushback, because I had just signed, at their blessing, 3 stipulated agreements for last chance for 3 white men who had all come to work intoxicated. And so when I push back and say, well, why her and not them? It didn't even dawn on them to think about the fact that they had, within 30 days of her incident, allowed me to sign a stipulated agreement. And so those are the moments that, whenever you have those experiences, to be able to push it in front of their face and make sure that they know that there's a problem. My boss at that time still talks about it every time we see each other, the fact that I was able to bring it to his attention, and he's kept that with him since. So those are the ripples that we make. Pushback is part of the job. My biggest advice is to make sure you take care of yourself, because it can be overwhelming, it can be frustrating. There are times that I think, not today, I can't. And so those are the moments when you have to step back, take care of yourself and your soul, so you can fight another day.
So I'll pick up where AVP Brown left off. It has been training, tiring, wearing on the soul, but it's also been a privilege. And when I think about all the positions I've had a chance to be in, I was tapped on the shoulder and answered the call. And it's something that comes with the work. In regards to pushback, it's a perfect sort of indicator of whether or not we're doing what we've been invited to do. So if we're receiving pushback, it's a signal to me that we're pushing an institution, we're pushing individuals, we're pushing systems and structures in ways that they need to be pushed. So I welcome the pushback. I'm invited, I look for it, and it's a sign of where an institution is in its journey to becoming more inclusive.
I'm trying to find like the most useful, example for you all with these questions, but I think for me in a predominantly white space, whether it was college or law school or working at white law firms is what it was, and being like one of only in everything, basically. I was the only Black person in the environmental practice, and I just remember feeling a tremendous amount of pressure to always be perfect, and to not make a mistake. And when I was brief writing, feeling like I was only as good as my last brief or my last assignment. But that was as an early professional. As I gained more confidence and more experience, I've decided, and especially in the role that I'm in now, just to be my true, authentic self. And I'll tell you this really quickly, and then I'll move on. But so a couple of weeks ago, I was in Dallas, and my son plays football there, and he goes to one of the elite schools, high schools there. It's a sophomore. So it's not uncommon to have NFL players, like their children, that go to these schools. So I was there with a former NFL player. I decided I was gonna stop outing him by naming him. But we were in his yard, with horses and the lake, and just chilling, basically. And we watched the Rick James documentary. And that Monday morning when I came to work, I usually ask my staff, what did you do this weekend? And I usually start out, and for one moment I thought, should I share this? And then I thought, yes, absolutely, I should share this. This is my experience. This is, who I am, what I do when I'm not at work. So I would encourage you all to do the same to the extent you can. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have to wear different hats and fit into different systems. Of course, you'll have to do that. And then in terms of pushback, I'm sort of like Dr. Price. I don't really know what that means because, I have to keep going. So some resistance, we have to figure it out. We have to have a discussion. Have to keep going. So.
Well, let's see. So I have held leadership positions in predominantly white settings, in academia, in private sector, as well as in government. I will say that, and I'll get to the pushback piece in a minute, any leadership position that you're in, you're going to be challenged, okay? You're going to be challenged. And so you have to have patience. You have to be the leader. You have to be the one with the foresight, the one with the patience, the one that can reconcile the sort of pushback that may come your way. Now, as an African-American leader in a predominantly white setting, that pushback may take some different nuances, right, that you have to also have patience with and also deal with in a thoughtful and hopefully leader-like manner. When you're sort of at work or at school and you're sort of part of your peers, you don't have to take guff from people necessarily. But as a leader, there is a certain amount of responsibility that you hold to not just bite on every little slight. So you have a choice, I think, on the pushback when you're leading in such organizations. You can either take the challenge as a slight, but you'll be wasting time in responding to such challenges. As a leader, you should have the ability to resolve such slights in a clever manner that assures that they don't happen again. And that's basically the effective use of power. And it doesn't have to be power in an ugly way, it's just power in terms of your ability to speak to a certain person in a certain way that helps them understand that that may not have been appropriate, and I'm gonna let it slide this time, kind of thing. Or you could take it as a challenge to clarify why you made a certain decision or why you made, why you're gonna go the direction you're gonna go in. Sometimes that challenge is a legitimate challenge, and it just requires a little more clarity so that you can sort of get folks to see what your vision is, something that's, of course, part and parcel of being a leader. But all in all, you have to think about all of the challenges you face and be able to bring a varying set of skills to those challenges so that you can move your task forward.
Yeah, thank you. The great thing about being at the end of the line is that everyone has said everything almost. But look, like many of you will be, I have been in many positions. I've been one of the few, if not the only person of color in either the company or typically in that level of leadership. And that's whether when I was practicing as a doctor or when I've been running health systems or even in, well, not so much in this role, but I'm the first, as you know, I'm the first person of color. Fortunately, I have a lot of people to lean on. And I think that I agree with everything that's been said. I mean, what I would add is that, nowadays the type of pushback that I've seen, it's not overt. It's not the sort of thing that you watch on the TV where someone calls you the N-word or someone says you're not qualified or something like that. It's typically pretty nuanced. When it's overt, like for example, I was in a company and I was the chief operating officer of 14 hospitals. So 14 hospitals, the CEOs of those hospitals all reported to me, and I reported to a CEO. And I had some colleagues that were peers of mine, senior leaders in that company, and the day I arrived in the company, I won't say where it was because people would know what company I'm talking about. But the day I arrived in that company, I was sitting at lunch with a couple of those senior peers, and one of them leaned over and said, you know, there's a peer of ours that's not at the table right now, but I heard him say in the breakfast in the morning, I heard him say that you were only hired because of a quota of who they need to hire. And that was a big slight because I was totally qualified for the position. Now that type of pushback, that type of statement, I believe you have to sort it out. You have to address it. You can't let it lie. And so I actually went and over time talked to that gentleman and said, I heard this. I heard you said this. Can you help me understand why you would say something like that when I'm fully qualified for this role? So there are some things that you push back on, but when they're overt. But even when they're not overt, whether they're overt or not, I think it's important, and this is something that was just said already, I think it's important to be direct, but to also be empathetic. Because sometimes when you stop and you're direct with that person, you say, why did you say this? It made me feel this certain way. Or why did you do this? It made me feel this certain way. You'd be surprised at what the answer is. Sometimes it's no defense for people like that, but sometimes it's complete ignorance, and then it's an opportunity for you to educate. When I was working in Alabama, I was practicing as a pediatrician in Alabama, people used to say to me, why are you going in and treating the children of parents who have swastikas on their arms? Why are you treating their children? Why are you refusing to treat their children? That's a nuanced pushback, right? They're not saying something to me, but they're showing me that what they believe. But I saw it as an opportunity to educate them. And, some of it was education by demonstrating that, I'm as good as any other doctor and I can treat you. But a lot of it's just educating them that I'm a human being just like you. I'm equal to you. And so I think it's important to be very clever as we address some of these issues, but also to be direct. So I do believe in directness, calling it out, but being empathetic when you do that. Well, by the way, just before we go to the next question, I will have to leave. Sorry, I'm working tonight, so I'll have to. There's a legislator that I have to see at the game later on, so I don't need to go for the beginning, but I'll have to leave maybe in about 20 or 30 minutes.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to the next question, and this question is going to be for Dr. Price, President Abdenobi, and Dr. Tuitt. So the question is, in your time here, what improvements have you seen and what changes still must happen for us to improve the experience of Black students on our campus, bearing in mind our history of racist incidents? So we're going to start with President Abdenobi.
Right. Well, what I'm going to do, not to be duplicative, I'm going to turn most of this over to Frank because he's got a list I know of that he can run down of all the different things that have been done. But one of the things I wanted to say is what you see sitting here today is part of the change, because change comes bottom up, but it also comes top down. You have to have the leadership that really understands. And for example, as I look around the table here, Letisa Reed was just hired. How long ago did we hire you? August 13th. Frank is, I think, just over a year, Frank. Lakeisha Brown, we just hired. How long have you been on Lakeisha?
I'm on week 7.
Week 7, right. And so this is, and of course, Ebony, who's been here longer. Ebony's the dean of our law school. How long have you been for Ebony?
July 2020.
Oh, was it July 20? Okay, July 2020. So the first African American dean of the law school. So this is, and then of course myself as the interim president. So these are the kinds of changes. These are the kind of changes that are important. They're not everything, but they're important. So I'll let Frank run down the list of some of the other changes that have happened.
I've been here for like every other day, kind of. And I've seen so many changes here at University of Connecticut in terms of, of course, our students and the faculty and staff, but all of the wonderful things that we've done in terms of recruiting students from all over the state and beyond. We have been bringing in the best of the best of the best students, and you're performing at such marvelous and high levels, and we're seeing that consistently. We are the land grant, sea grant, space exploration university of the state, and you represent us and represent us well. But let me tell you, as much as I love y'all, and y'all know I love y'all, I got y'all spoiled and everything, but for me to look at this dais, to look at this illustrious table of extraordinary people who look like us, who look like me, it just warms my heart. You heard President Andy say, you know, these short tenures of people just been here not that long a time. And when I can see that we're gonna have like a what, Josie? A town hall with what? Black leader, what? How many? Who's that? Because I remember when it was Willina and Willina. And now look at this. Are we not so proud of what's going on? That to me is the biggest change. The other thing I will say that's been consistent, and I won't go into more too long, but we have, even back in the old days of when we first came, and this was one of, she just made me know, this was one of my first students.
Oh.
Way back, yes, back in the day, but that's another whole story. That's another whole story that makes you so happy. But we've had this extraordinary commitment from the very highest levels of the university. That has not faltered. It has not failed through all of the years that I've been here at University of Connecticut, every single president. And Andy is he's my sixth president. And consistently, one after the other. They embraced the community of diversity. They embraced the community of color. Some did more, some did less. But they've always given us that commitment from the top, and we're continuing to enjoy that. So that's the biggest change. I mean, it is prettier than it used to be, y'all. We have grass where we never had grass before. But it's so pretty and just so beautiful and so wonderful. But the wonderfulness is, that's all I got to say. You got something else for me?
Dr. Jewett?
So I was trying to acknowledge Dr. Price for her longstanding support for the Black community here at Uconn, for standing in the gap. As she just said, when she was often the only person doing so, and I do think that that is the biggest change in the short time that I've been here. This leadership table looks very different than when I started, right? And you could take all of us off this table and replace us with another set of Black folks who have been put into leadership positions here in the institution within the past year. So there's been a real commitment to doing that. So that, I know that's another question we'll get to, whether or not that makes a difference in terms of racism. We'll come back to that one. That's been a huge change. I think the other change that I'll point to, and there are lots of them, I won't go through the long list. Obviously, many of the changes have happened as a result of student engagement, student activism, so I want to acknowledge that. We wouldn't have an anti-Black racism course if it wasn't for students. We wouldn't have declared racism as a public health crisis if it wasn't for students. So, for students in this room, right? So I want to acknowledge that. There have also been folks who have been working behind the scenes, often not being recognized for the labor that they've been doing to support the Black community here at Uconn. So I want to acknowledge them too. I think that's been a change in the past year. We've seen more people coming to the table, asking what they can do, trying to be a part of the solution. And so that's been encouraging to see. Where would I like for us to get to? A place where everybody who works at Uconn sees it as their responsibility for lifting up the souls of Black folks here.
So we're going to move on to the next question. So it's, what do you think defines you in your leadership, and do you believe that race plays a role? So we're going to start with President Abernathy this time.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that that race defines me in my role as a leader, but it's very important, and I embrace it, and it's something that it's a huge responsibility, because when you're someone like any of us, when you're a person of color, and you're in a role of significant leadership, it's your responsibility to not only help to change the environment for the future so that there's more diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also to make sure that you're mentoring and supporting others who come after you. And so I think it's a huge responsibility. So I would say it hasn't defined me, because I'd like to say that all of us, regardless of our color or our background, that there's more to it than that in terms of why we are leaders. But I do think it's important, and I do think that you have to embrace it, and you have to do this sort of thing that you're all doing to make sure that we can improve our work environments for other people for the better. You know, I think of people like Dr. Marja Hurley at Uconn Health, who some of you might know. Dr. Marja Hurley, she started a pipeline program that brings vulnerable youths of all different sort of diverse backgrounds, many of them black and brown youths, into a pipeline to say, look, you can be a professional. You can be like that doctor that you've seen when your parents take you to see the doctor. Or you can be a professional in healthcare. You can be a researcher. You can be an academic. And she's created that pipeline. And it's so funny that, well, not funny, it's so impressive that one of the doctors, an orthopedic surgeon, who's on our board of directors, not board of trustees, but board of directors at Uconn Health, came through that program. And so it makes, the reason I tell that story, and there's many others, there's doctors in Uconn Health and beyond, in Hartford and across the world, who started in that pipeline program of people who, for socioeconomic reasons, for being marginalized reasons, never believed that they could be anything special or different than what they had experienced all their lives. And it takes one person, of course there's a whole team around her, but it takes one person to change that for generations. And so it is critical to embrace who you are, to live that, to be true to that, to be your authentic self, not to pretend. But at the same time, as a leader, I think it's important to also have confidence in yourself. I always tell people, whenever you feel like you don't have confidence in yourself, go read your own resume, or go talk to someone that knows you and reminds you that you deserve to be in the role you're in. You deserve to be in that role. And so have that, build your self-confidence as you go along, but always embrace and know that you're there to open doors and to change environments and to educate people. So, as a leader, you're not just the leader of black and brown people, you're the leader of everyone. And so it's important to use the opportunity when you're in these roles to educate those who have not been exposed to diversity, to educate them, to help them get to the right place if they're not there already. And as you know, there are many people who are not necessarily what we would consider diverse themselves, but are champions for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I don't want to paint, everyone with the same brush. But it is your opportunity to educate as well. So, sorry I went a bit long on that, but thank you.
Well, let me say that I love the President's comments about when you lose your confidence as a leader, go read your resume. I can't tell you how many times I've done that over the course of my career, because I too, and it doesn't matter whether you're in your early 20s or in your late 50s or beyond. Each new level brings new challenges of leadership. And you have to sort of remind yourself that you're ready for that new level. And so I really appreciate that comment. But, in terms of the question, what defines me and my leadership? Do I believe race has an impact? I think Attorney Reid, the President, said it. More than anything, I think as a leader, I try to be authentic. I try to be who I am. You have to trust that the years of experience and the years of work that you put in will benefit, will help you, will give you the guidance and give you the experience. But you have to be yourself, because people respond to that. People respond to people who are real, as you know. As a leader, you have to make some tough calls. You have to go against some people that you may care deeply about or you used to work with. But you have to be yourself, and if they call you out for not being their friend like you used to be, you just have to stick to your guns. They'll figure it out one day, and they'll come back around. But you have to be yourself. And it served me well. How does race matter? You know, as an African-American, race always matters. The question is, what do you do with it? And I, since I was a very young boy, wanted to do something with it. My father was able to. I had a good example in my life that allowed me to follow and achieve something. And I've tried to approach my leadership as a black man in a way that will bring people along, regardless of race. Provide the example of the way different people from different backgrounds ought to be treated, the same, fairly. And so I try to do that in my career. I think I've done it reasonably well. But also, as a leader, I think it's important that those who have helped you rise up to become a leader, you want to make sure that you sort of pay that forward, right? When you have the opportunity to get into leadership, help others get leadership opportunities as well. If you're a part of the project that we're all a part of, I think, of achieving equality in America and throughout the world, I think we have to take small steps in the spaces that we live in. And part of that is taking on leadership, bringing others into leadership roles, and just letting that flow until one day maybe our children or our grandchildren will see what Dr. King dreamed of.
So when I read the question, what stood out to me, jumped out at me is what defines you. And I know that's not the entire question, but that jumped out. And I wanted to say that I define me, right? And I'm not defined by one particular experience, one particular mistake, one particular, great event that occurred. It's a cumulative experience. And so for me, my background plays a lot in that. I tell people, I think everyone on this panel knows, I'm from, I say, zip code 53206, and that is the zip code in the United States with the highest rate of poverty and incarceration. I was raised by a single mom. We were on public assistance. All of those things, I think, do, cumulatively add up to who you are, how you see the world, how you view yourself. I think what defines me, my leadership, is really what defines me as a person. I'm bold, courageous, innovative, not afraid to be the only one, and to think differently. I think in terms of what role the race plays, I think the first is, like Dr. Blanchard said, you cannot separate race from your experience, in my opinion. It can't be separated from my experience. It's deeply, who I am. And it actually makes me proud to be who I am, because I know that the struggles that we as a minoritized group face, and we still, in my opinion, reign supreme in many areas, and I mean that in terms of excellence. And we're deeply creative, and we're deeply, just able to, what's the word? We have tools. We develop the tools that we need to move through each stage. So that's what I would say.
So I'll add just a little bit to this. Absolutely agree that not only my race, but my gender as a black man matters. And it matters in terms of how I show up in the places that I have a privilege to be a part of. It absolutely is a central part of how I think about my role as a leader. But it doesn't singly or solely define how I think about my leadership. And so I think for me that's an important distinction. And just in terms of the intersection of race and gender for me, I think in my leadership styles, I've seen how I can navigate certain spaces that some of my black female colleagues are not allowed to navigate in the same way, showing up, trying the same strategies. And so how the folks we are working with, how the systems and structures we engage respond to us isn't the same. And I think for each of us, we identify different ways of navigating those spaces, which is appropriate. It's what makes us authentic in how we show up.
So Attorney Reed basically stole what I was going to say. Because really, it's, my leadership and myself are defined by me. Race and gender really does affect my leadership style, and it has created the path that I've had to take to get where I am. There have been times in my career that I wanted to stop because I'm like, why do I have to work so much harder? Why am I up late at night sending emails? Why am I triple checking everything that I do to make sure it's good enough when, I see what a colleague is willing to submit and, everything's fine for them. They blow it off. Those are the things that really have affected my career. Before I came to Uconn Health 6.5 weeks ago, I was at a for-profit company. Everybody had target goals and measurables in order to obtain bonuses. And of course, I saw everybody's bonus, right? But I usually never speak on those things. However, there was one that happened for a man who hadn't met his metrics. And he received double the bonus than I got. And I had met all of mine. So I went into the CEO's office and just said, I just want to talk this through. And we're talking 2020, his response was, he's got a young family. So there's that whole paternal thing that, support the man because he's the head of the household. Well, I'm the head of my household. I'm a single mother. But that shouldn't matter. My status as a single mother, married mother, the father that works and, has a wife that stays home, none of that should matter. It should be about the metrics that were defined. But it wasn't. And, I had to go have the conversation, and of course, it worked out at the end. But those are the things that continue to happen that affect my leadership. So now, after all these years, I find myself being more aware and awake as situations happen and unfold in front of me. How can I look at this with a different lens? What may be some underlying factors that are affecting this particular situation? So I think that's what's really sharpened my skill, that I've taken it to heart and used it instead of taken it and become bitter.
Josie, when I first saw that question, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, how do I narrow it down in terms of what actually defines me as a person? And for me, I really had to go back to how I was raised in Atlanta, in South Atlanta, in a church community. Everybody knew everybody, the neighbors, everybody else. And so many people, and maybe this is why I do it so much for y'all, I think, so many people invested in me. They like, Valina, that girl, she's gonna be, that girl, that's a smart girl, she can do this, and she can that, and the third, and that's what, somebody needs somebody to do something, ask Valina, she could, and I'm like, oh my God, do they really think I can do all this stuff? But it was that confidence that people had in me as a person. My parents, my next door neighbors, Miss Mamie, Mr. Moreland on the other side of us. My pastor, my first grade teacher, who interestingly died just not that many years ago. I know you, I know. You're like, what? Okay. But all of these people really cared about me. And this is why it's important for us, for you. I'm not talking about just what I'm doing. Invest in other people. Speak into other people. Elevate them. lift them up. Give them what you have inside of you and share it, because it makes a difference. And when that's not working, I tell my students, and y'all heard me say this, look, if you are really getting real low on encouragement, go to your mirror. Close the bathroom door, lock it if you want to. Go to your mirror, close the door, lock it, and talk to yourself. You look in that mirror, you talk to yourself, and you say, you know what? I am wonderful. I am grand, I'm smart, I can achieve anything. I'm not afraid of anything. I've got this. Sometimes you can't find somebody else to talk to. You have to talk to yourself. But so we can define ourselves by thinking inside, like, who are we really? But you can become all of the wishes and dreams you have. And you will go on to define yourselves in a wonderful and a glorious way.
Amen. That's hard to follow, and I echo so much of what everyone has said. You know, one of the things that related to what Attorney Reed said is when one is thinking about, you know, defining yourself, I think the thing for me has been, and you know, throughout my life, is that I have charted my own course. I have defined my own path. I have to come up with my own definition of success. And so often, you know, people, and we have a tendency to look to our lefts and look to our rights and kind of define success in terms of other people. And I really have pushed back against that and really defined success for myself, because what may work for someone else may not be, and what might be right for someone else may not be right for me. And I'll give you a concrete example of that. When I started out teaching at Thurgood Marshall School of Law, historically black college and university in Houston, Texas. And after 4 years, I was transitioning to another school, and I had the great opportunity of having other offers of where I could go. And one of my mentors was then Professor, now Senator Elizabeth Warren. She was my contracts professor in law school. I was her TA in law school, and she had served as a wonderful mentor to me. And I had gone to her and I said, well, you know, which school should I go with? And she recommended that I go with this other school, not South Carolina, because it was higher ranked, because the faculty scholarship was more renowned, and she thought, you know, my megaphone was going to be bigger if I went to this other institution. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, but I'm going to be me wherever I am. I'm going to have the impact that I want to have regardless of where I am. And so I have to define for myself what's right for me and what's right for my family at that time. And being from South Carolina, going back to South Carolina, going back to the home state that raised me and that gave me so many opportunities, was the right thing to do, even though it was a different decision than someone that I greatly respected had. But, you know, making that decision and charting my own path it's really led to me being here tonight. I don't know if I had gone to that other institution that I would have had the same opportunities that I had at South Carolina to develop, you know, as a leader and to get those kinds of opportunities. So that's one thing I would say, and advice that I pass on, that really define success for yourself and define what your path is going to be for yourself, not in comparison to others. And the other thing that I would say that I consider myself to be an empathetic leader. And it's interesting when one thinks about empathy, oftentimes you hear about empathy and you think about it in terms of, oh, putting yourself in someone else's shoes and thinking about things from their perspective. But there's another aspect of empathy that is really about seeing someone else as a person, seeing someone else and thinking about the experiences and backgrounds that they've had and thinking of them as a person, not just putting yourself in their shoes, but actually thinking about them as a human being and approaching them and understanding them and giving them grace when maybe they're not even deserving of grace, because none of us are truly deserving of grace. Like, grace is bestowed upon us out of the goodness of other people's heart. But when you think of someone as a person and think about what they may be going through, then leading in that empathetic way, I think helps at least me be a more effective leader. And so I think having empathy, being your authentic self, I show up every single day as a black female dean, as a black female professor. There's no way that I escape that. There are expectations that are placed on me because of that by others, and I'm very cognizant of that. And again, it's an honor and it's a privilege to be in that role and to be able to have that kind of impact that all of us want to have and provide those opportunities for others. But it comes sometimes at a cost, and we can talk about that later in the Q&A, but it's important that we remember that, and we know that, again, we cannot divorce, or we cannot take off certain hats. We wear all of the hats all of the time, and that can be taxing. And so it's important that we think about that, and you all think about that as you all are developing as leaders and our leaders here on campus, and that, you know, when those taxing times come, that, because they will, and I'm sure they have for you all, that you have that support system, because no position and no institution is worth your joy. So you have to remember that as a leader as well.
So in the interest of wanting to give students the time to ask questions after, we're only going to do a couple more questions. So this question is for Dr. Blanchard, Attorney Reed, and AVP Brown. Has Uconn taken the appropriate steps to be an active opponent against discrimination and bias in the workplace? So we're going to start with Dr. Blanchard.
Oh, gee, thanks. You know, I think we have taken the appropriate steps to stand up an active program. I think a lot of that has to do with the changes that my colleague and good friend, Dr. Frank Tewitt, has brought over these last few months here at Uconn. And you could see this acceleration of activities that are designed to, you know, block these behaviors. This is not going to be solved simply by appropriate steps. It's going to be solved by continued application of not only the appropriate steps, but some innovative steps, some aggressive steps, because, you know, we're trying to correct something that has lasted for centuries, and it's just not going to change overnight. You're talking about changing people's hearts and minds. We can design all the policies that we want to change behavior, but it may not change their attitude. Changing attitude is a lot harder. And so I don't know what steps an organization can take, that can implement to change attitudes. I think attitudes are changed by how we treat one another and how we demand to be treated. Appropriate steps in terms of discrimination, the kind of discrimination that we can correct, pay equity, being able to work in a workplace without unfair treatment or without microaggressions necessarily that are destructive to the work environment, that create a hostile work environment. We can correct those things with policies and steps and practices. But the real long haul, I think, is to change hearts and minds, and that requires, I think, a more thoughtful and a more deeper, and frankly, a more loving approach.
So, in my role, I have oversight for the office that investigates discrimination complaints. And so any member of the community can come to my office and file a complaint if they feel that they've been discriminated against based on a protected status. So, and I always like to say we all have at least two, which is race and or color, and then our gender categories. So I would say, since I'm the compliance person on this panel, that, and I really mean this, I think, yes, certainly, we meet the requirements in terms of the floor, but we can do better. And I think we're moving that forward momentum, and we're moving to a higher goal, so we are closer to the ceiling.
Yeah, so I'm the person who has to put all the pieces together in terms of workforce application, and I'm happy to work for an employer that declared racism a public health crisis and said it loudly and proud in social media and out in the world. We have taken steps. I used to work at Uconn several years ago. I'm a boomerang employee. I see the difference in just the few years that I've been gone and come back. Here, everybody on this panel is an exceptional example of some of the changes that have been made, but also the collegiality we have. I talked to Dr. Tewitt today to talk about how do we work together to make change and impact the workforce. Attorney Reed and I have already talked about ways that we can work together to identify trends and how do we execute interventions into those areas. So yes, I think we certainly have taken steps here since my time being gone, and now that I'm back, President Agwanobi gives me the open space to have conversations that are frank and real. And to have leadership that I can talk to like that is everything, because that means that I can make change. I've worked for employers that were not open to those conversations, tolerated microaggressions. I don't feel like microaggressions when somebody tells me to smooth my hair down for my corporate headshot, and don't wear your big earrings, and don't wear your normal lipstick color. I had one place who asked me before they put my picture up on the leadership page that they noticed on my resume my middle name was Lynn, and would I like to abbreviate Lakeisha to L and go by L. Lynn Brown, because Lynn is easier to say. And so those are the things that don't happen here, and those are the things I didn't experience here coming back, and those are the steps that we're taking to make change, that ripple effect that happens. And while it's good, we still have a long way to go, but I'm confident with our leadership that we'll get there.
So now we just wanted to give everybody in the audience the opportunity to ask questions if you had any. So we have 2 microphones at the end of each aisle if anybody wanted to come down and ask a question.
Hello everybody, for those that don't know, my name is Mason Holland, I'm a senior vice president here at Uconn. I just want to ask a question about mentorship and about you guys are in these very, very similar, powerful positions. What do you see the value in your mentorship and your role in mentoring individuals who are just coming into the field that you're in and not necessarily knowing how they can be in the positions that you are without your expertise? How do you do that?
I'll just say a couple of words. Go ahead, Leticia. Go ahead, Leticia.
I kind of wanted to jump in on this because it takes us back a step to what Dean Nelson and Dr. Price were saying about investing in other people. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to invest in other people. So you've heard it, each one teach one. I think I always try to leave something with the people that I meet, something that they may not know or didn't understand, provide some clarification, but my role, my journey has been successful only because of grace and because there are people who said, we see Leticia, her mother can't afford to send her to this private school, but we think she is private school material, so we're gonna figure it out. And so I went to elite private schools from kindergarten through high school, and it was because my principal paid for my tuition. And, he really, followed me all the way through college. When I got married, he gave me away, all of those sorts of things. And I think it's important for me to do that to the community, for my community, which is you, the students. And I just want to also say, you all hear us with the titles that we're giving you. Everybody knows who Dr. Andy is, right? But we all, I think, report to Dr. Andy pretty much, right? On this panel.
I'm the team leader. I'm not people don't report to.
The team leader, he's our team leader. And I just say that to say, this is like an unprecedented opportunity for you all you have access to us. You have people who are, right under the president in terms of the org chart, and then me being right under the vice presidents, and then you have Dean Nelson, who's probably, several steps higher than me, but that's good. You should take advantage of the opportunity that you have here.
Yeah, I just want to echo, well, first of all, I'll just say, I can't say it better than that, but, if there's one thing I would do differently, if I was to do it all over again, is I would have more mentors and I would keep them longer. You know, it's just amazing. When I look back at the mistakes that I've made, and we've all made mistakes, when I look back at it, I think, you know, if I just had someone I could have talked to that knew more than me, had been there before, I would not have made that mistake. That was, you know what I mean? So I think it's one, and also when I look at people that I've been privileged to mentor, I'm always so impressed with them, young men and women who, what I'm impressed with is not just their accomplishments, but it's the fact that they know how important it is to ask questions, just to be vulnerable, just to say, look, I don't know, I'm not, you know, yeah, I'm top of my class, I'm in a great school, etc. But you know what? I'm confused. I'm not sure what my path needs to be. I'm not sure what direction I need to go in. My parents say I need to go in this direction, but I think I need to go in that direction. Should I choose this company? Should I choose that company? And a mentor doesn't tell you what to do. A mentor is just there to sort of be present with you and to share their experiences. And then you make your decisions. And so that's something I would have done a lot more of. And I think it's probably one of the most important things that you can do is to have a mentor or mentors in your lives.
If I can just add a couple of things to that, I couldn't agree more. But one of the things that's important to remember, a mentor-mentee relationship is exactly that, a relationship. So you have to take the initiative, and you also have to be an active player in being the mentee so that the mentor is engaged with you. I am proud to say that Josie is my mentee. She reached out, you know, saw me speak or something like that last year, reached out, sent an email, asked if, you know, we could talk. And it has been a great relationship and hopefully a helpful relationship since then. But you have to take that initiative, right? Even if the person says no, or the person says, oh, you know, I don't have time, you're not in any worse of a position than you were in before you asked. But if you don't ever ask, and as Attorney Reed said, we are all very open and available to all of you all. Again, we wouldn't be in these positions if people hadn't done that for us, and so we're always wanting to do that for other people. So do reach out, do take that initiative, but do be an active participant in the relationship between a mentor and mentee. And the other thing that I just wanted to add is that there's a difference between mentorship and sponsorship. So not only do you need to cultivate mentors, but you need to cultivate sponsors. And what do I mean by sponsors? Sponsors are the people who are speaking your name when you're not in the room. Sponsors are people who are nominating you for things, recommending you for things. It was an African-American female dean who nominated me for the Uconn deanship. And so if it were not for her, I wouldn't be here. And so you want to cultivate both of those relationships, both a sponsorship relationship as well as a mentorship relationship, because both are incredibly important as you go throughout your career.
So can I just add to the sponsorship piece? So I was nominated for this position by a former colleague. I'm at UW-Madison. She's now, her name's Sherry Charleston. She's now the CDO of Harvard. And so you see how if you stay in touch with people, you make these connections. And I said it when I came to speak with you all, with Dr. Price, be kind to each other. Like, you never know. You just never know who's going to be in the room and who's going to be responsible for helping you get to that next step.
If I could just, I'm sorry, I'm going to speak, I'm going to have to slip out, so I just want to say this last thing is that that word you said about networks, that's also critical. So you heard about mentorship, sponsorship, but just knowing people and being, and I don't mean sort of fake networks where you're just you know, getting someone's birthday and sending them a card every year so they remember you. Actually engaging with people, getting to know them, remembering them, helping them, working with them. You'll be amazed at the value of that to them and to yourself as you go through life. And so just something else to think about as well. And I want to thank you all for just being so amazing and having this event. And this is part of it. You're here asking. You're doing exactly what we're talking about. And so, you know, kudos to all of you.
Hi, I'm Anya Mehta. I'm a sophomore here and a multicultural diversity senator in USG. And I consider myself an empath. And so I guess my question is mainly for Dean Nelson. I guess being an empathetic person, I haven't always been taken seriously in leadership roles. And I'm wondering if that your approach as an empathetic leader has ever caused you to face any hardships and how you deal with those.
I don't know that it's caused me to experience hardship, but it has made people wonder if I can make the tough decisions. Because there's kind of a running joke a little bit in the law school that ebony will tell you no, but in that ebony way. And so you're not burning bridges or whatever by my approach, but sometimes, particularly as a female leader, as someone who is leading from a place of empathy and a place of caring and compassion, there may be those that think that you're not going to be a strong leader because of that. But in fact, those are qualities, I think, that make for very strong leaders who can develop relationships, have those hard conversations that a leader needs to have, but do it in such a way that people still want to follow you, right? If you're leading but nobody's following you, then you're not really a leader, right? You're not bringing your institution along, you're not bringing your colleagues along. And when you've shown that empathy and that compassion towards someone in those difficult times that they're experiencing, and then when you have to, down the road, have those difficult conversations with them or tell them no, because they know that you truly do care, then that actually helps you to be a more effective leader. And so, I think leading from that place of empathy, and again, I don't think it's just a female characteristic. Obviously, there are males and others who, lead from that place, but you're right. Sometimes we are looked upon as less of a strong leader or can't make strong decisions or can't make difficult decisions, but that is not the case at all. It's just the way in which we make those decisions and the way in which we communicate those decisions, that we're not blowing things up and being destructive to our institutions and to our teams. And so I think it's a wonderful characteristic to have, and I'm happy that you have it. It will take you very far.
Hi, my name is Tainaja. I'm a freshman here. My question is for Attorney Reed. As the coordinator for Title IX, what kind of cases do you work with? Like, well, not cases, but like just any of the examples of the work you do here on campus.
So I am the Title IX coordinator in the public-facing sense. So I respond to all of the agency inquiries, but I have directors and folks underneath me who actually work to keep the university compliant with Title IX. So I'm involved in that. So for example, I may get a call from the conduct office, and then they want to have a call with the dean of students and have me make the call on whether this is a Title IX case or not, and which rules apply and which don't. So I'm really there to interpret the regulation and make sure we uphold those things. I do less of that now, really, on the executive level, but that is really, what I like to do. I'm a hands-on person. I like to really be on the ground working. And so I think I'm not gonna be able to do that all the time in this position, but opportunities like this make me feel like I'm doing work, that I'm on the ground, that I'm hoping to cultivate our future, which is you all.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ted Kufu. So my question was, as a Black man within a corporate setting, how would you be yourself at the same time meet corporate standards? I'm not sure if I explained that right, but just necessarily be in the right space at the right time, not to confuse any interpretations of what your actions are, or not to have that second guess as a Black man.
See how they're all looking at me? So, as the CFO of the university, you have a duty, you have a fiduciary duty to manage the resources of the university. And you know that if you don't manage it like a business would, for example, that you could put the good mission that we have undergoing here at risk. And so part of what I try to understand in working with other leaders at the university, many of whom are at this table, is, show me how what you're doing adds to the sort of, adds to the value of the university, but also does so in a way that makes sense, business sense. Frank, if you don't mind me sharing, when Dr. Tewitt first came to the university and he was putting his strategic plans together for ODI, and he had great support by the president. He had won that support from the president. So he was proposing some pretty aggressive moves. And so he brought them to me and says, from a business standpoint, what do you think? And, I gave him advice. I suggested some changes. I hope that he saw them as legitimate and helpful and productive. But it was sort of, tamp down the spending a little bit. That's kind of what I do. Everybody who brings a proposal to me, I'm like, it looks good, let's tamp down the spending a little bit. So there's always a business side of things, but you still have to evaluate what is the value that this proposal brings to the table, whether that value is sort of straight academic or whether it's building the diversity. I know from my own research that adding diversity to an organization, particularly a complex organization, actually adds value because of different perspectives. If we're a simple organization, the theory goes, you may not need diversity. But in a complex organization, and increasingly all organizations are more complex, you need diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of backgrounds, diversity of perspective to be innovative in addressing the challenges that are in front of you from a work standpoint. So as a business officer, I try to draw from that knowledge and from that experience, but allocate the resources in a way that still allow you to do some of those things, but you have to do other things too. So, organizations, when people tell me that, this is not a business, I say, oh, yes, it is. It's $1 billion business that delivers educational services. And if we don't treat it like $1 billion business, it won't last long. So you want to make sure that your enterprise lasts so it can do the good work that you all want us to do.
So I think the other part of your question had to do with sort of how you show up in your authentic self. And I think we all make decisions about how we align who we are and our values with the environments that we work in. And sometimes there are situations where you have to show up a particular way where you don't would it normally do. So an example is, I don't like to wear ties. There's certain environments that require you to wear ties. Every now and then I will put on a tie. But my default is to not wear it. And that's how I show up to work.
My name is Mackenzie Robinson. I'm a freshman. I'm the ACES Center in USG. And as a freshman, being undecided, my question, being unsure of my path, my question is at which point did you feel stability on your path or in your career? If you felt like the pushback, there was a point where you could keep going and the pushback didn't push you back.
It took me a while. I started my career in human resources when I was 24, and I quickly moved into a leadership position, and I had worked all the way through college. I always tended to end up in some sort of a leadership role, even if it was supervising. Is Husky still here? Yeah, I used to work there too. But I've always found my way to some sort of leadership. But it wasn't until a few years into my real big HR leadership role that I finally felt my feet land on the ground. And that's when I connected with my first real workplace mentor. And she didn't work in my workplace. I had, all of my leadership was white. And we had met at a networking event, which we connected, and she stayed in touch. And once I started connecting with her and talking things through, I found my own path. Felt my feet hit the ground. I started to reward myself with my own praise, like Dr. Price said, look at yourself in the mirror, as crazy as that sounds. Or like me, talk to yourself in the car and say, I did that. Especially when you're young and you're sitting in front of a board of directors and almost every single person there is a white man. So again, it's finding your way. Your journey is just beginning, but reach out for a mentor. If you start working at a place, make friends with the HR people, because actually we're there waiting for somebody to come and say, hey, I need some advice or some coaching. And my most recent mentee came to me from a union environment saying he wanted to work in the field of human resources. And over a 5-year period, we worked on steps to get him there, and now he's a director of HR at a business in California. So you'll find your way, but don't lose focus. Just keep striving.
And your path may not be linear, right? So, oftentimes I think as a freshman, and even I'll think even when I graduated law school, I thought, oh, this is the path I'm on, this is the path I'm going to be on, and it's going to be on that path for the next 30 plus years until I retire. But of course, the skill sets that you develop along the way and your interests and your passions can change. And so your path will likely change as those change. And that is perfectly okay and to be expected. That's just kind of the way life unfolds. And so I only practiced for 2 years before I was ready to leave the law altogether because I was finding that it was unfulfilling. And of course, I just, I wanted to be a lawyer my whole life. And so it was very jarring when I get out and I'm doing it in a particular way, in a particular capacity, and it's not fulfilling. And so that's when I looked for other areas and ways to use my degree that were more fulfilling. And that's why I joined the academy, which is, and I've never looked back. But even in that, right, I could have just been a professor and just that for 30 years, then retire. But that, you get to a point where it's like, well, what's next? How can I be more impactful? So your career and your journey will go in a lot of different directions. And that's really kind of how it's supposed to be in a lot of ways. So. Just kind of go with the flow and reach out for that advice and that coaching as you navigate your own path that you've created.
So I am dying to do this, right? Just to share this with you all. I, just by a show of hands, whatever, if you want to participate, that's fine. So many of you are probably already going to formal events, right? You've been to a formal event, to dinners, weddings, whatever. And one of the ways that I felt out of place was that, I didn't have that sort of background where I knew where the drinks were, the bread was, how to set a table. We didn't eat dinner together at a table. So it is something that I learned from exposure through other people. And I will say, and I'm not ashamed to say it, I was very certain by the age of 27 where everything went, right? So there is something I want to leave you with if you're ever sitting in a formal setting at a table. If you do like this, right? So you got your drinks and you got your bread. And so I said I was always, so did you guys get that? Everybody? All right, so remember that. I mean, it's important. I mean, and those are things that I just picked up along the way, and you put yourself in these environments, you'll find the support systems that you need. It will happen. You guys were less impressed with that than I thought you would be.
Hi, my name is Lauren Ampadu. I'm a sophomore studying pharmacy studies. And my question to all of you tonight is, as a leader, how do you navigate helping your team members to stay motivated even after facing hardships and difficulties? And then what would you say to those team members who you see have potential to become leaders too someday, but just aren't leveraging their potential to do so? Like, how would you help them reach their full potential?
Well, how do I help my teammates? Well, these are my teammates at the university, and I'm thrilled to help them. Often I can't help them in the ways they want to be helped because it's usually about money. But I'll get their details. But no, I want to be able to help my colleagues, especially these colleagues, be successful. And that's whether that's sitting down and talking to them, especially, it's funny, we went down the list when the president was here, and many of my colleagues are brand new within the last couple of years, Melina accepting. I've been here about 5 years now, so I kind of feel like the veteran, together with Melina. And so I feel honored to be in a role, in a position where I can help my brothers and sisters be successful at this particular university. I would do it in any university, in any set of brothers and sisters. But so I think it's enthusiasm that you have to start with. You have to love people. You have to want to help folks, and part of that motivation comes from having been helped in my life and having a great deal of gratitude toward that. So I think it starts with that sense of feeling, that sense of responsibility. Then it just becomes joyous, in terms of working with your colleagues. How you I don't know how you do it. You do it in the best way you know how. But when there is an opportunity, for example, for, you're a teacher and there's a student that is struggling, you set aside an extra hour or two. You have to be willing to give of your time and give of yourself in order to really bring people along into leadership roles. And it will impress them to a point where they will do the same in their lives when that time comes.
In the human resources space, we talk often about career development within teams. Also in tandem with succession planning. What is your plan for when you move up? Who's the next person behind you? And are you looking internally to develop talent? That hasn't always benefited us, because a lot of times all that extra effort was reserved for them. I see that changing a lot now. That's what I do in my role, is to make sure that I'm paying attention to that, calling out when I see someone has missed the mark and missed folks within their unit who are exceptional that aren't getting that kind of help. And then internally with my own team, I do career development as a regular part of my one-on-ones, talking to people about what do you want next. I currently work with a leadership team internally that they just want to retire. So our conversation is really about succession planning. Who have you identified internally that can move into this role, and what tools do we need to give them to get there? And in terms of motivating staff, that's a hard job to take on, because a lot of times it is an act of selflessness, because teams generally are lagging and feeling low for a reason. That would include you feeling low as well. But I take the time to make sure I engage in self-care, to continue to focus on my team, what our joint goals are, and offering people the space and the opportunity to speak freely. Tell me what you feel. It's a safe space. Actually, Leticia and I, our first conversation, I said, well, I want to tell you about this, but I don't know. And she said, this is a safe space. So she honored me with that as well. And that's how I like to work with my staff also.
So just a couple additional points. One, on the self-care piece, it's something Dr. Price is probably tired of hearing me talk about, but I try to remind the team and ODI specifically that the work we're doing has a significant toll on our bodies, and that if we're not taking care of ourselves, we're not going to be any good to you all. So we have to figure out how to do a better job of practicing self-care in a very demanding role. The second piece is, as we've added new folks to our team, in the interview process, I'm always asking them, so I know you're applying for this job, but where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years? And how can we help you get there as a part of this job? Not that I'm trying to, get people out the door before they've been hired, but it's a commitment to wanting to see folks grow and develop. I see our jobs as talent scouts and creating opportunities for folks to become the best versions of themselves.
Okay, seeing that it is a little after 8, we're going to close off the town hall. Can we give a round of applause for... I I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. It does mean a lot that you came here, and I just wanted to reiterate that, it is important to know your Black leaders and to connect with your Black leaders. As Jean Nielsen mentioned, I hopped on that as soon as she got here. They really do give you really great pointers when you're kind of lost, when you kind of know what you want to do, but you don't know how to get there. So once again, thank you for coming, and I hope to see you at a later event.
Congratulations.